Hello there. Welcome to the Saroy channel, wherever you are in the world, and so much love to each and every one of you. I hope you're doing remarkably well, and I hope things are going well with you. And I'm so glad you've joined me for a very interesting story tonight that I know you're going to really enjoy. But before we get started, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Click the notification bell and the thumbs up, and let's get started with tonight's story. Dear Sarah, and all your lovely listeners, I glanced out of the living room window of my parents' home in North Carolina. As my golden retriever Bertie began to bark incessantly, I groaned in frustrated annoyance as the barking got all the louder, and when Bertie barked, it was almost impossible to hear myself think. I drew in a deep breath to steady myself, my stomach recoiling in disgust. I observed the obscure figure marching indignantly up our long driveway, looking as belligerently cantankerous as ever. I knew who it was, of course. I could see the familiar outline of the red T-shirt that he always wore, rather like a customary uniform, along with the awkward gait and the distinctive limp to his left leg that made me wonder if his left leg was wooden. I braced myself for another confrontation with our disagreeable neighbour, Theo Biggerstaff, who had become like a thorn in my family's side of late, that wouldn't stop stinging since he'd moved into the house next door to us. I had heard about people having repugnant next-door neighbours, but I'd never understood how the gravity of living next door to someone so offensively objectionable could seriously impact your life in a negative way, as it had done to my family. I knew Mr. Biggerstaff would want to speak to me, and have another contentious go at me, as he had done only 24 hours prior. He was like a dog, returning to his bone again and again, refusing to let it go, even when there was nothing left of it. I rue the day he actually moved next door to us, but they are not wrong when they say you cannot always choose your next-door neighbours, just like you can't choose your family. My mother sagaciously told me to ignore Mr. Biggerstaff, but it was easier said than done. He was pugnaciously miserable, an old sod, and his constant complaining was beginning to wear me down. What the hell was wrong with our truculent next-door neighbour? And why on earth had he just bought the big property next to us that was suitable for a large family to occupy, but he was living all on his own, and was getting well along in years? I gather his late wife Dora had died 5 years previously, and my father had joked that the poor woman's life must have been insufferable to be married to a man such as him. "I'm sure he must have nagged her non-stop," my father had said. "I don't believe I've ever encountered a more obnoxious, quarrelsome character such as him. It doesn't look as if he has any family, and goodness knows why he chooses to rattle around in a large house like that on his own. Usually when people get to his advanced age, they downsize, but Mr. Biggerstaff has done the opposite, almost as if he's rebelling against his age. But the only person he's fighting is himself." My mother had nodded sadly in a defeated resignation that seemed to have quashed her fighting spirit. What a pity that it was Mr. Biggerstaff who happened to buy the old house next door to us, and not a lovely young family. Honestly, I don't think I've met a more dreadful man in my entire life. The other day when he knocked at the front door complaining about Bertie yet again, I did my best to defend your dog for you, Cara, but it was no use. I assured him that Bertie might be rambunctious and a little on the boisterous side, but he's a very sweet dog. But Mr. Biggerstaff had the audacity to call me a stupid old woman who didn't have a clue about what I was talking about. And what a meddlesome dog that Bertie is. I take offence to being called stupid, but old, that was not nice at all. I mean, Mr. Biggerstaff is old enough to be my father, and he called me old. Can you believe that? It's a little like the pot calling the kettle black, don't you think? My father chuckled, reaching out to squeeze my mother's hand reassuringly. "You're not old, love," he laughed. "That man needs glasses, that's what I say. He can't be seeing right if he thinks you're old." "Well, that's very kind of you to say, sweetheart," my mother chuckled. "But after Mr. Biggerstaff tore me down in the way he did, I am rather beginning to wonder if perhaps I look older than I think I do. Maybe I need to address my hair or something. It's so easy to lie to ourselves, to tell ourselves we look younger, while denying the crow's feet developing around our eyes, or the odd grey hair that has made its appearance. It's called being in denial, I rather think. Listen to me, love, said my father. You don't have any crow's feet around your eyes. And don't you dare listen to Mr. Biggerstuff. He's the one who doesn't know what he's talking about. I hate to tell you this, love, but there are some people we meet in life that are not nice. They seem to enjoy tearing other people apart and saying all kinds of mean things to them that aren't even remotely true. My guess is they deliberately undermine others because it makes them feel better about themselves. That is Mr. Biggerstuff for you all over. The obnoxious, uncouth man is nothing but a big bully. I had noticed that since he moved into the old Victorian house next door to us, he had no family or friends visiting him, which didn't surprise me at all. I mean, who'd want to befriend such an unlikable character such as him, who was as repellent as a skunk as far as I was concerned? I noticed the only people who visited the house were people that had fixed up the wooden deck for him, people he'd employed, people who attended to the windows and anything else besides that needed an upgrade. But even those workers he employed got the job done as quickly as they possibly could, and bolted, as if they couldn't finish the job fast enough, and who could blame them for that? Since Mr. Biggerstuff had moved next door to us, my family hadn't had a moment of peace. Most of his anger was directed towards me. Mr. Biggerstuff hated my dog with a burning passion, and blamed me for not being responsible enough about ensuring that Bertie didn't wander onto his property, when our properties bordered each other's, without a dividing wall or fence. We may have known the boundaries between our two properties, but how does a dog even know that? I suspected Mr. Biggerstuff was lonely living next door, and had nothing better to do with his time than run his mouth off like a very noisy diesel lawnmower that didn't have anything nice to say. The house next door was the original property, built on a substantial lot of land, about 5 times the size of our property. Mr. Biggerstuff's Victorian house had once belonged to a sweet old dear called Julie Warrington, who had lived in the house all her life, and had raised her family there, which included her husband Peter and her daughter Ivor. In more recent years, after her husband Peter had died, and Ivor, her daughter, had long since moved away to Florida, Julie Warrington hadn't been able to afford to fix up the old house. So while she'd lived there, it had been somewhat shabby and run down, a little neglected perhaps, definitely crying out for a new lick of paint and a carpenter's loving touch to repair some of the rotten wood on the property. Julie Warrington had passed away there 8 months prior, and unfortunately I'd been the one to find her, and it hadn't been a pretty sight by any manner of means. The memory of discovering her crumpled, limp body, lying in a heap at the bottom of the sweeping, old-fashioned staircase, still haunts me to this very day, for there are some things in this life we just cannot unsee, and this is one of them. I was 19 years old at the time, but over the years had developed a very close relationship with Julie Warrington. I had befriended her when I was 10 years old, always popping around to visit her and bringing her cookies I'd baked. I'd draw her pictures that she'd hang on her refrigerator extremely proudly, as if I was her own daughter. Julie certainly appreciated my visits to her home, and I had grown very fond of her, liking her far more than I did my own grandmother. It would seem that despite the obvious generation gap between the two of us, none of that had mattered an iota, as Julie Warrington and I had clicked, and sometimes when I visited her, I clean forgot how much older and wiser she was than me, for we became the firmest of friends. I had considered her like a grandmother figure in my life. She told me I rather reminded her of herself when she was my age, and maybe our similarities had drawn us close together. Julie was as stubborn as I was, and we both were headstrong, with strong opinions on many things, and I was besotted over her dog Bertie as much as she was, and when I got the opportunity, I was always eager to take Bertie for walks in the woodgrove to help Julie out, especially after her more recent bout of flu that had lingered on for far too long, like a tick on a dog's coat that you just can't shake off. On the day I found Julie lying dead at the bottom of the staircase, I had dropped over to her house to give her some of my mother's homemade pickled cabbage, for she'd been experiencing some gut issues that had been troubling her significantly. I believed the fermented cabbage, known for its natural probiotics, would be very helpful to her. My mother swore blind about the power of probiotics in fermented foods. Julie told me her doctor had failed to prescribe any probiotics for her after she'd finished the course of antibiotics she'd been taking, for the flu she had experienced just refused to go away. It was the rapid decline in her health that had worried Dr. Larkin significantly, so he immediately put her on a course of antibiotics, as he was desperately afraid her flu might potentially turn into pneumonia. I had spoken to Julie Warrington on the phone on the evening of her death. She told me that her gut had been giving her grievous discomfort. The problem had certainly escalated a week after she'd finished taking the course of antibiotics she'd been prescribed. I told Julie I'd be around the next day promptly to give her some of my mother's sauerkraut that might help her with her gut issues, as I believed the antibiotics she had taken may have destroyed her healthy gut bacteria, and that might potentially be the root cause of her problems. Not that I was really qualified to talk about health issues like that anyway. "Good Lord, I think you may be on to something there, Cara," Julie had said to me. "Now I come to think about it. After I finished that course of antibiotics that Dr. Larkin prescribed for me, my stomach has never been the same since. My stomach has just not been the same since. I mean, he never prescribed me any probiotics, which is very strange. Normally, when I'm given antibiotics, Dr. Larkin always prescribes a course of probiotics for me, but this time he did not." "It is rather weird," I admitted, "but maybe Dr. Larkin forgot to put probiotics down on your script. I suppose if you're seeing patients all day long and writing tons of prescriptions for people, it's easy to overlook something like that, don't you think?" "I suppose you're right. That could explain why I've been under the weather of late," Julie admitted. "I haven't been feeling like myself for quite a while now. I've been below par. I didn't tell you what happened the other day, Cara. Well, the day before yesterday, actually. I was taking Bertie for his walk in the woods. I told you I was up to walking him again. But the truth is, Cara, I just did not feel like exercising. I had absolutely no energy. I felt so deflated. I suppose I thought I was stronger than I was. But I think the flu knocked me for 6, and so it's probably natural to feel this tired. I guess I just overdid things, that's all. I persuaded myself that I needed to take the walk all the more, especially if I was feeling so fatigued. I mean, they do say that you should push yourself to exercise even when you don't feel like it, so that's what I did. My old father always used to say, 'If you don't use it, you lose it.' And I never forgot his words. And at my age, losing my physical fitness is not something I can afford to do, because once your strength goes, you're on a slippery slope of no return." "I'm not sure your theory is right, Julie," I said. "I mean, you had a very nasty bout of flu, I may remind you, and you were out of sorts for a long time. It can take a while to get back on your feet after you've been sick. Sometimes we have to listen to what our bodies are telling us. If you didn't feel like going for a walk, you probably shouldn't have gone. If you were worried about Bertie not having enough exercise, I'd have gladly walked him for you like I did when you had the flu. You know how much I love walking Bertie, and I always enjoy an excuse to take him out. Bertie loves you too, Cara, and I'm extremely grateful to you that you walked him every day when I was ill. But I was determined to get back on my feet, wasn't I? Push myself a little. But like you say, I think I overdid it. One thing is for certain, Cara. When I'm gone, I'll leave Bertie to you, because he couldn't be in better hands." "Julie, don't talk like that," I said. "There's life in the old dog yet," I teased. "Well, I hope you're right about that, Cara. But I have to admit, after that dreadful bout of flu. I'm just suddenly beginning to feel extremely old these days. I can't remember a time when I felt so drained. But then again, I suppose at my age, after any illness, it takes a while to bounce back. And one is much slower to recover when you're old. You're right. I should have called you that day and asked you to walk Bertie for me. I didn't think of it at the time, I have to admit. I just thought I needed to push myself to do that exercise. If you had walked him, I probably wouldn't have passed out in the woods in the way I did. It gave me quite the fright, let me tell you. I should have listened to my body. Sometimes I'm my own worst enemy, when my stubbornness persuades me to grab the bull by the horns, when I'm just not up to it. I think underneath it all, I knew I wasn't ready for all that exercise. But in truth, Cara, I'm so desperately frightened of becoming, frail, less mobile, more dependent on other people. You know me. I'm far too proud to ask anyone for help. You passed out in the woods, Julie, I said, unable to hide the notable shock in my voice. That's dreadful! What happened? Why didn't you tell me about this? Well, I'm fine now, aren't I, Cara? It happened, but it's over with. There's no point in harping over it. It's like crying over spilt milk, isn't it? That's not the point, Julie. Passing out in the woods, that's hell of a scary. You certainly weren't up to taking Bertie out by the sounds of things. Leave walking him to me until you've got your strength back. What happened, exactly? Well, where do I begin? I don't know how to explain it to you, love, said Julie. Let's just say, during my walk in the woods with Bertie, you know what that dog's like. He got so excitable about something. I have no idea what about. I've never seen him like that before. 1 minute, he was terribly afraid. The next minute, he was animated. I felt quite queasy at the time, as if I was going to throw up. My stomach was gurgling violently, and the weakness I felt was indescribable. It didn't help that Bertie's obsessive barking really made me feel all flighty, very nervous, as if I was about to have a panic attack. I've never had a panic attack before a day in my life. But I was overcome with the most dreadful irrational fear that I cannot explain, along with a sense of impending doom. And that, coupled with how feeble I felt at the time, was all far too overwhelming. I do think the gut is connected to your brain. They say it is, you know. I think when your gut is in disarray, it can make you unduly nervous. Well, it certainly did me. Bertie's barking was making my ailing condition 1,000 times worse, let me tell you, Cara. I mean, it's like when you have a migraine headache and someone puts a bright, blinding light straight into your eyes that only serves to exacerbate the problem exponentially. I told Bertie to be quiet, but it was useless. That incorrigible golden retriever of mine simply doesn't know the meaning of the word. I think he'd sniffed out an exciting scent trail and went ballistic about it. You know what he's like when he finds a scent trail he likes. Oh, believe me, I do. I chuckled. Bertie's got an amazing sense of smell, Julie. He gets excited when he smells something interesting. I remember once walking him in the woods, and he found a scent that he liked so much he rolled in it, refusing to leave it. It was like he wanted to rub the scent all over himself like a perfume. And I've got a funny feeling, Julie, that he was rubbing himself against some animal scat, or worse still, a decomposing rabbit. In the end, I put a leash on him, and when I took him back to your house, I asked you if I could wash him, because he was smelling so bad. You have no idea. I have no idea what he rubbed himself in. I'm sorry, Julie, I'm getting sidetracked with this conversation of ours. You were telling me you were feeling off colour. Bertie was being impossible. Is that when it got all too much for you, and you fainted? Well, not quite, actually. All I remember was that Bertie was barking at this one tree in particular. Now, this tree was shrouded by dense foliage. It was impossible. because I couldn't see a thing. But it felt as if Bertie was seeing something or someone. Something that I couldn't see anyway. He began to growl at the tree. You know, a really aggressive growl, I have to say. But then later he began to wag his tail, thumping it against the ground like he does when he sees a stranger he likes very much. I have to tell you, Cara, with my stomach lurching like that so very violently, Bertie was beginning to make me feel very uncomfortable. All I wanted to do was to go back to my house. My heart was positively thumping in my chest. Suddenly I went all giddy. I felt so light-headed. I knew I was going to faint. And then I did. I collapsed in the woods on the soft earthen floor. I do remember losing my footing as I fell. Luckily for me it was a soft landing, or I dare say my old rickety bones might not have fared too well in the circumstances, if the surface I'd landed on had not been so gentle, that is. Bertie was licking me all over my face with his wet tongue. And then after that, everything went black. I hate to tell you this, Cara, but I remember nothing after that fainting spell. My memory is a complete blank, which is a bit worrying, of course. I just can't understand why I can't remember anything. Anyone would think I hit my head and was severely concussed on that fall. But nothing like that happened. I didn't bang my head. There was no bumps on my head, and I certainly didn't twist my ankle or anything like that. I got lucky, but why I can't remember anything after that I find extraordinary. It's impossible to fathom, you know. Good Lord, Julie, that is bad. You need to see a doctor about this at once. The fact you collapsed on your walk is not good at all. You need a physical checkup, you really do. People don't faint for no good reason. How long were you out for? Julie paused for a brief moment. That's a good question, Cara, and I'm not entirely sure what the answer is. You know, I never watch the clock these days. I don't need to. When I was younger, it was different, of course. I watched time because it was a prerequisite of my daily life. That was when my time was more structured. It was dark, shall I say, when I came round. And when I say dark, I'm not exaggerating when I say that it was pitch black out there. I think I'd walked Bertie at about 8:30 that morning, so I must have been out cold for over 11 hours or possibly more. I know it sounds preposterously insane and rather incredulous, but that is exactly what happened. And in truth, I'm still trying to get my head around this. As passing out for so long, well, it's never happened to me before, and I find it rather disturbing, and a little disconcerting, you could say. Are you kidding me? You mean you woke up in the middle of the woods when it was dark after several hours of being out cold? How did you see your way clearly to get back to your house? Because even during the daytime it's like twilight in those woods, but at night you can barely see your hand in front of your face. The thought of you collapsing in the woods all on your own is extremely disturbing. Anything could have happened to you, Julie. Maybe if you want to take Bertie for a walk in the woodgrove in the future when you're well, I should always come along just for security, just to ensure that nothing like this ever happens to you again. Julie, I'm not sure you're fully recovered from your flu yet, which is why you might have blacked out. You're probably still incredibly weak, even though you clearly don't want to admit this to yourself. You're 81 years old, for goodness sake. And I know you believe you're in your 20s still, but I hate to inform you that you're not getting any younger, and the flu hasn't done you any favours either. Believe me, love, I know I'm not getting younger these days. I told you, I feel it in my bones. You sound like my daughter Ivor, she said with a chuckle. I may be old, but I can still walk, and surprise, surprise, I'm not dead yet. There's still life in these rickety bones of mine yet. I told you the only reason I fainted was because I was feeling off colour. And you're right, I probably haven't fully recovered from the flu. I haven't got my old strength back, and I'm impatient for myself to get back into shape But at this rate, if I continue to push myself like this, I might just kill myself. I have to say, Bertie's incessant barking that day made things far more worse for me. I mean, I don't know what came over me, but I was suddenly green at the gills, struck down with this awful feeling of nausea, like nothing I've ever experienced before. But I have to tell you, Cara, if you want to join me on my morning walks in the woods in the future, you're more than welcome to do so. That's if you'd like to keep a frail old lady company. It's good for me hanging around someone as youthful as yourself, Cara, because when I'm in your good company, I do feel rather young again. Well, I'm happy to join you on your walks with Bertie in the woods, or walk him on my own, if you're feeling a little sketchy. But none of this frail talk, please, Julie. You're in remarkably good shape for a woman of your age, but you're pushing yourself too much after being ill. You're running before you can walk, and that's absolutely insane. Even young people know better. They take it easy on themselves after they've been sick. So you pushing yourself and taking on more than you can chew, Julie, is ridiculous. I don't want to sound as if I'm nagging you, but at your age you need to take your health very seriously. Maybe I'm just a foolish old lady who's losing her marbles. That must be it, said Julie half-heartedly. I don't know how to tell you this, Cara, but I did not wake up in the woods after my blackout. Would you believe that? Ostensibly, I have no recollection of leaving the woods on my own, with Bertie at my side. But I woke up to find myself on my sun lounger of the wraparound porch, in the pitch black, with Bertie lying on the wooden deck beside me. He's such a devotedly loyal dog like that, never leaves my side. I woke up feeling very bemused. I have no memory of sleeping on my sun lounger, nor do I know how I got there in the first place. My last memory is collapsing in the woods, everything going completely black after that. So when I woke up, I felt decidedly confused, very disorientated. It's like if you last remember going to bed in your bedroom and you wake up to find yourself lying on the patio. You wonder how the hell you got there. The conclusion you probably come to is that you sleptwalked or something like that. But none of that has ever happened to me before. Well, I don't know what to say, Julie. But maybe you did get up after you passed out in the woods. Given you were so out of sorts, so incredibly fatigued, you probably managed to drag yourself from the woods to your wraparound porch. Perhaps you were feeling dizzy and disorientated, so you dropped down on your sun lounger and just fell asleep. Maybe your fragmented memory is so vague you don't remember doing any of this. Haven't you had experiences of going into the kitchen to get something out of the fridge, and when you get there you can't remember what it is you wanted? Even at 19, that happens to me all the time. Well, yes, that happens to me a lot more frequently these days, I have to say, Julie admitted. I've always had a remarkably good memory, you know, but it's not what it used to be. The same can be said for my hearing and eyesight. Well, you collapsed in the woods, Julie. Your memory was probably disjointed. Think about it. Sometimes when you drive to a location, especially if you know the place well, you do it on autopilot, don't you? I cannot tell you the amount of times I've driven to a place without paying close attention. But I drive safely and efficiently, as if my higher self is dictating the course of my journey. What I'm saying, Julie, is when you look back on that journey or that road trip, you have no memory of it, but you did it automatically without thinking about it. I think that's what happened to you in the woods. You got up in a blurry, very dazed state after your fall. You weren't completely compos mentos, but you instinctively headed back home, and then clean forgot about it. So you were surprised to wake up on your sun lounger. That kind of thing happens all the time to some of my girlfriends, when they get drunk. I have a friend who was blind drunk, and woke up to find herself in her bed in her parents' house the following morning. But she had no memory of how she actually got there. She barely remembered the last part of her evening, until her friends told her what happened. Everything had been a complete blur to her. I suspect she must have been grateful that she managed to get home safely, but that was actually thanks to her friends. But you're not exclusive on all of this. Well, maybe that is what I did. Unless I'm getting Alzheimer's or dementia and I'm completely losing my memory. I hope to God that that is not the case, said Julie, with a notable concern in her voice. I just couldn't imagine what it would be like to have a disease like that, and not even recognize your own face staring back at you in the mirror. I have a friend with Alzheimer's, you know, and she's caught up in her own little world all the time. I went to visit her recently. She had no idea who I was, which was very upsetting. She was a very good friend of mine. And to see her so confused like this, well, it broke my heart. Alzheimer's disease is dreadful, I admitted, but I suspect it's much worse for the loved ones than it is for the sufferer. But you needn't worry about that, Julie. You've got an amazing memory. I think you were exhausted, that's all, after your bout of flu. You blacked out on your walk in the woods because you were physically too exhausted, and the walk was too demanding for you. I'm sure you woke up on the sun lounger on your deck, but you didn't know how you got there because your mind had been a foggy blur. But thankfully you managed to get home safely, but you didn't remember any of it. It happens, you know. Oh, you're a good friend to me, Cara, you really are. You do have this way of making an old lady feel so much better about herself. I feel relieved to hear you talk like this. Come to think of it, it does make some kind of sense what you're saying. But I'm afraid that's not all. When I woke up on the sun lounger, once I'd switched the porch light on, I noticed a huge bunch of wild ginger lying by the sun lounger, tied up with a leather string. It was as if someone had gifted the wild ginger to me and left it on the porch. But who would do that? I have no idea where it could come from. It certainly wasn't me that picked it, unless I'm really losing my mind. Well, maybe someone who knows you've been having issues with your stomach left the ginger for you. You do know ginger is great for a bad stomach. Of course I know about the benefits of ginger. Who doesn't? It's a very good remedy for nausea and motion sickness, is it not? Come to think of it, Cara, when I was in town 2 days ago, and I was at the hairdresser having a cut and blow-dry, I mentioned to my stylist that I was having issues with my stomach. Now, Sheila Arlington's a great friend of mine, you know. I've known her for years. She's very obsessed with natural remedies for the body, which was why I happened to mention to her my condition in the first place. That woman doesn't trust Big Pharma as far as you can throw them. So she has a healthy skepticism about prescribed medication of many kinds. So she gave me a huge lecture on antibiotics and how they damage your gut health. Anyway, the long and the short of it is she was telling me about what to do about my dicky stomach. She was suggesting all kinds of home remedies that I could try to settle and calm down an inflamed stomach, like peppermint tea and chamomile, that she said would probably soothe my stomach lining. She never mentioned ginger, though, now I come to think of it. Well, maybe she remembered that ginger was good for you, in hindsight, I suggested. Maybe she had some wild ginger growing on her property, and thought it might be good for your stomach, so she dropped it off at your house. Of course, that must be what happened, Julie agreed. Sheila Arlington is very kind like that, you know. A very thoughtful person she is. She'll go out of her way to help anyone if she can. She's been to my house for tea on several occasions, so she knows it well. Perhaps she did bring me the wild ginger. She must have seen me sleeping on the sun lounger on the porch. Didn't want to wake me up. That must be it. What a thoughtfully kind thing for her to do. She's a lovely lady like that, you know. Thinks of everyone else before herself. She's a rare diamond. I'm very fond of her, you know. I must thank her. So there we are. That is the end of part 1. Part 2 is tomorrow night. I look forward to you joining me then. Until next time, goodbye and good night.